We live in an age of unprecedented debt. The numbers are staggering, and they continue to grow with each passing day. Governments around the world are engaging in deficit spending on a scale never seen before. This practice has become a common tool for managing economies, especially during times of crisis. This means they are spending more money than they take in through taxes and other revenue. The gap between income and expenditure is widening, leading to an ever-increasing national debt. The result? A mountain of debt that future generations will be forced to reckon with. This burden will impact their ability to invest in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Is this sustainable? The answer, in the long run, is no. The consequences of unchecked deficit spending are dire and can lead to economic instability. Governments like households cannot live beyond their means indefinitely. Eventually the bill comes due. When that happens, the repercussions can be severe, affecting every aspect of society. But the short-term allure of deficit spending is undeniable. It provides immediate relief and can stimulate economic activity, making it an attractive option for policymakers. It allows governments to fund popular programs, stimulate economic growth, and respond to crises, all without having to make politically unpopular spending cuts or tax increases. This can lead to improved public services and infrastructure development. The COVID-19 pandemic, for example, saw governments around the world open the fiscal floodgates. Emergency measures were implemented to support businesses and individuals during unprecedented times. Trillions of dollars were pumped into economies to keep businesses afloat and individuals solvent. This intervention was crucial in preventing a total economic collapse. This was necessary to avert a complete economic meltdown. However, the long-term impact of such massive spending is now becoming apparent. But it has also left many countries with eye-watering levels of debt. The challenge now is to find a way to manage and reduce this debt without stifling economic growth. The question now is how to manage this debt. Strategies such as austerity measures, economic reforms, and debt restructuring are being considered. Can it be inflated away? Can economies grow fast enough to outpace it? These are complex questions with no easy answers. Or are we headed for a sovereign debt crisis that will make the 2008 financial crisis look like a walk in the park? The potential for a severe economic downturn looms large. These are the questions that keep finance ministers and central bankers up at night. The stakes are incredibly high, and the decisions made now will shape the future of global economies. And they are questions that should concern us all. The impact of deficit spending reaches far beyond government offices, affecting every citizen in the global economy at large. Governments are drawn to deficit spending for a variety of reasons. It can be an effective tool for stimulating economic growth, particularly during recessions. When the economy is sluggish, businesses and consumers are less likely to spend. This can lead to a vicious cycle of declining demand and economic contraction. Deficit spending, however, can help to break this cycle. By injecting money into the economy, governments can boost demand and encourage businesses to invest and hire. This is the logic behind Keynesian economics, which argues that governments should spend counter-cyclically. That is, they should spend more during recessions and less during booms. Deficit spending can also be used to fund investments in infrastructure, education, and research and development. These investments can pay dividends in the long run by boosting productivity and economic growth. Furthermore, deficit spending can be a necessary response to crises such as wars, natural disasters, and pandemics. In these situations, governments may need to spend heavily to provide relief, rebuild infrastructure, and support their citizens. However, the allure of deficit spending is often accompanied by a dangerous disregard for its long-term consequences. Like a sugar rush, the initial high of economic stimulus can quickly fade, leaving behind a bitter aftertaste of inflation, higher interest rates, and a heavier debt burden for future generations. The key to understanding deficit spending lies in recognizing its dual nature. It is a concept that can be both a boon and a bane, depending on how it is wielded. It is neither inherently good nor inherently bad. The outcomes of deficit spending are determined by the intentions behind it and the strategies employed in its execution. Instead, its impact hinges on the context in which it is employed and, crucially, the manner in which it is financed. The source of the funds and the economic environment play pivotal roles in shaping its effects. Just as a surgeon's scalpel can be used to heal or to harm, so too can deficit spending be a tool for economic progress or a weapon of financial self-destruction. The precision and care with which it is applied make all the difference. When used judiciously and strategically, deficit spending can be a powerful tool for national development. It can stimulate growth, create jobs, and fund essential public services and infrastructure. Take, for instance, the United States in the 19th century. This period was marked by significant economic challenges and opportunities. The young nation was heavily in debt, largely due to the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. The financial burden was immense and the future seemed uncertain. Yet this debt, far from crippling the nascent economy, financed critical infrastructure projects like the Erie Canal, which unlocked vast swaths of the American interior for trade and settlement. These projects laid the foundation for future prosperity. Conversely, when deficit spending becomes a crutch, a means of postponing difficult but necessary fiscal adjustments, it can lead to economic ruin. It can create a false sense of security and delay essential reforms. The Weimar Republic in Germany during the 1920s serves as a stark warning. The economic policies of the time offer a cautionary tale. Faced with crushing war reparations and economic turmoil, the government resorted to the printing press to finance its deficits, triggering hyperinflation that wiped out the savings of the middle class and paved the way for political extremism. The consequences were devastating and long-lasting. The lesson is clear: deficit spending is a potent tool, but one that demands a surgeon's precision and a statesman's long-term vision. It requires careful planning, foresight, and a commitment to sustainable economic policies. Used wisely, it can build a nation's future. It can drive innovation, support education, and improve the quality of life for citizens. Used recklessly, it can leave behind a legacy of economic ruin. The stakes are high, and the choices made today will shape the economic landscape for generations to come. One of the most closely watched metrics for assessing a nation's fiscal health is its debt-to-GDP ratio. This ratio is a critical indicator that economists, policymakers, and investors keep a close eye on to gauge the economic stability and fiscal responsibility of a country. This ratio, simply put, measures a country's public debt as a percentage of its gross domestic product, the total value of goods and services produced within its borders. By comparing the debt to the GDP, we can get a sense of how well a country can manage and repay its debt. A high debt-to-GDP ratio suggests that a country may be living beyond its means and could face difficulty servicing its debt obligations. This can lead to economic instability, as the country might struggle to meet its financial commitments. Economists have long debated the safe level of debt to GDP, with no definitive consensus emerging. Some argue that higher debt can be sustainable if it is used for productive investments, while others caution against the risks of excessive borrowing. However, a seminal 2010 paper by Carmen Reinhart and Kenneth Rohoff, Growth in a Time of Debt, sent shockwaves through the economic establishment by suggesting that a debt-to-GDP ratio exceeding 90% could act as a significant drag on economic growth. Their research indicated that high levels of debt could slow down economic progress and reduce the overall growth potential of a country. This finding, though subsequently challenged on methodological grounds, sparked a fierce debate about the dangers of high debt levels. Critics argued that the data and methods used in the study were flawed, leading to a re-examination of the conclusions drawn. While the 90% threshold should not be treated as an immutable law of nature, it serves as a useful benchmark for understanding the potential risks associated with excessive debt. It provides a reference point for policymakers to consider when evaluating their country's fiscal policies. High debt-to-GDP ratio can limit a government's fiscal flexibility, leaving it with less room to maneuver in times of crisis. This can be particularly problematic during economic downturns or emergencies when additional spending is needed to stimulate the economy or provide relief. It can also lead to higher interest rates, as investors demand a greater premium for lending to a heavily indebted country. Higher interest rates increase the cost of borrowing, making it more expensive for the government to finance its debt. Moreover, a high debt-to-GDP ratio can erode investor confidence, making it more costly and difficult for a country to access capital markets. Investors may perceive that country as a higher risk, leading to reduced investment and slower economic growth. This can create a vicious cycle, as higher borrowing costs further exacerbate debt sustainability concerns. As the country struggles to manage its debt, it may need to borrow even more, leading to an unsustainable debt spiral that can be difficult to break free from. It may come as a surprise to many that the United States, a nation seemingly synonymous with debt in the modern era, began its existence entirely debt-free. Following the Revolutionary War, the Founding Fathers, led by Alexander Hamilton, the nation's first Secretary of the Treasury, made the bold decision to assume the debts incurred by the individual states during the conflict. Hamilton argued that a national debt, if properly managed, could actually be a national blessing. By consolidating the debts of the states under the federal government, he reasoned, the United States could establish its creditworthiness on the world stage, attract foreign investment, and foster a sense of national unity. Hamilton's vision proved prescient. The assumption of state debts, along with the establishment of a national bank and a system of tariffs, laid the foundation for America's economic rise. The national debt, far from being a burden, became an instrument of national development, financing infrastructure projects, westward expansion, and industrialization. However, the ghost of Hamilton's national blessing should not be invoked to justify reckless spending or unsustainable debt accumulation. The key to Hamilton's success lay not in debt itself, but in his unwavering commitment to fiscal responsibility and his belief in using debt strategically to achieve national goals. The lesson for today's policymakers is clear. Debt can be a powerful tool, but it must be wielded with prudence and foresight.